Once upon a time, in the peaceful kingdom of Ikuna, there was a handsome and proud prince named Adisa. He was admired by everyone in the land for his beauty, charm, and wealth. His father, the king, had grown old and was worried about the future of the kingdom. One day, the king called Adisa to his throne room. "My son," the king said with a heavy voice, "it is time for you to find a bride. The kingdom needs a queen, and you need to find true love." Adisa smiled. He knew every maiden in the kingdom longed for his attention. They admired him whenever he rode through the streets. "Do not worry, father. I will find a bride easily," he replied confidently. The king shook his head. "True love is not so simple, my son. You must choose wisely, for it is love that will bring peace and joy to your life, not just beauty." But Prince Adisa did not truly listen to his father. He thought that love was something he could choose as easily as picking the finest fruit from a tree. The news spread quickly across the kingdom. Prince Adisa was searching for a bride. From the far corners of Ikuna, beautiful maidens came to the palace. They dressed in their finest clothes, hoping to catch the prince's eye. Adisa, being selfish, was overwhelmed by the sight of so many lovely faces. He thought to himself, "Why must I choose just one? I am a prince. I deserve them all." With each passing day, Prince Adisa grew more and more selfish. He invited the maidens into his chambers, one after another, promising them love. But instead of keeping his word, he took what he wanted and moved on to the next maiden, leaving behind broken hearts and shattered dreams. Weeks passed, and soon the kingdom began to buzz with whispers. Many of the maidens Adisa had been with were now pregnant. Some kept the secret out of fear, while others wept in silence, not knowing what to do. The once peaceful kingdom was now filled with confusion and shame. One day, a wise maiden named Obianuju came to the palace. She was not like the others. She had heard the rumors but still decided to meet the prince. She had a different plan in mind. When she stood before Adisa, she looked into his eyes and said, "I know what you have done to the others, and yet, I still stand before you. But before I give you my heart, I want to know, do you regret your actions?" Adisa was startled by her boldness. No one had spoken to him like this before. He looked away, ashamed. "I do not know what you speak of," he muttered, though deep inside, guilt began to creep into his heart. But Obianuju did not back down. "You may lie to yourself, but the truth always finds a way to come out. One day, you will have to face the consequences of your selfish desires." Despite her warning, Obianuju chose to stay at the palace. She spent her days talking with the prince, and slowly, she began to see that beneath his pride, there was a man searching for something more than beauty. Adisa was confused, torn between his selfish desires and the need for true love. However, the kingdom was growing impatient. More and more maidens were turning up with children, and the people began to lose respect for the prince. The king, hearing the rumors, summoned Adisa to the throne room. "You have shamed this kingdom," the king thundered. "You have made promises you did not keep. What will you do when the truth comes out, and the kingdom turns against you?" Adisa was speechless. For the first time in his life, he realized that his actions had consequences. But it was too late to undo the damage he had caused. The people in the kingdom grew restless, and whispers of rebellion spread. Adisa knew he had to make a choice, but the fear of losing his power clouded his judgment. He sought out Obianuju, the only maiden who had not yet turned against him. Obianuju, knowing the storm that was coming, looked at the prince with sadness in her eyes. "You can still change your fate, Adisa, but only if you are willing to face your fears and own your mistakes." The tension in the air was thick, and Adisa could feel the weight of his actions pressing down on him. As he stood there, torn between pride and shame, a sudden knock came at the door. A messenger entered, looking pale and frightened. "Your Highness," the messenger stammered, "the people, they are demanding answers. They want justice." The prince's heart raced. He knew the time had come to face the consequences of his actions. But what would he do? Would he flee, or would he stay and take responsibility for the chaos he had caused? Prince Adisa's mind was a storm. The people's cries echoed from the palace gates, growing louder by the minute. They wanted answers, and their patience was wearing thin. His heart pounded in his chest as he turned to Obianuju, hoping she would offer a way out. But Obianuju only shook her head gently. "There are no easy escapes from the truth, Adisa. You must face what you've done, or it will destroy you." Adisa felt trapped. The weight of his mistakes pressed down on him, but the idea of admitting to the kingdom that he had failed, let alone that he had wronged so many, terrified him. He was a prince. How could he show weakness? How could he let everyone see the shame he carried? The prince made a decision in that moment. "I need time. I need to think," he said, his voice shaky but determined. Without another word, Adisa hurried out of the room, leaving Obianuju standing alone. He fled to the palace stables, where his fastest horse awaited. Mounting the steed, he urged it forward, galloping through the secret paths of the kingdom. He needed to get away, just for a while. He thought that if he could escape, even for a day, maybe he could find a solution. But no matter how far he rode, the voices of the maidens he had wronged echoed in his mind, and the faces of their unborn children haunted him. As the sun began to set, casting a red glow over the land, Adisa found himself deep in the Whispering Woods, a dark and mysterious forest where few dared to venture. It was said that the forest was enchanted, filled with spirits and ancient magic. Some claimed the trees themselves whispered the secrets of those who entered. The air grew cold, and a strange silence settled over the woods. Adisa dismounted his horse, the unease growing stronger with every step he took. Suddenly, he heard a soft voice. "Why do you run, Prince Adisa?" He spun around, his heart pounding. From the shadows emerged an old woman, her face hidden beneath a hood. Her eyes glowed with an eerie light. I am not running," Adisa stammered, though he knew it was a lie. The old woman cackled softly, her voice like the rustling of leaves. "You may fool others, but you cannot hide from the truth in these woods. The forest knows all." Adisa swallowed hard. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am someone who has seen many princes like you," she replied, her voice growing softer but more menacing. "Proud, selfish, and afraid of the consequences of their actions." Adisa felt a chill run down his spine. "I made mistakes," he admitted. "But what can I do? The people hate me now. They want justice, but I don't know how to give it." The old woman stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "True love is not found in beauty, nor is it won by selfish desires. You have wronged many, but it is not too late if you have the courage to face what you've done and seek forgiveness." Adisa trembled. The idea of asking for forgiveness seemed impossible. He had gone too far, hadn't he? "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The old woman raised her hand, and a gentle wind blew through the forest, carrying the whispers of the trees. "The choice is yours, Adisa. Will you continue to run, or will you return and make things right?" The prince stood frozen in place, torn between fear and guilt. The weight of his actions had finally caught up to him, but the path ahead was unclear. As the old woman disappeared into the shadows, leaving only the rustling leaves behind, Adisa knew he had to make a decision. But was he ready to face the people of his kingdom? Was he ready to stand before the maidens he had wronged and beg for their forgiveness? The forest seemed to hold its breath as he mounted his horse once more. He turned back toward the palace, the night growing darker with every passing moment. His heart was heavy, but something inside him had changed. He no longer ran out of fear but out of a need to fix the wrongs he had done. Meanwhile, back at the palace, things had only gotten worse. The king was in a panic, unsure of where his son had gone, and the people's anger was growing stronger. The maidens who had been wronged gathered in front of the palace gates, their faces filled with sorrow and rage. They wanted answers, and they demanded justice. Obianuju watched from the palace window, her heart sinking. She knew that Prince Adisa could not run from his problems forever. The time would come when he would have to face the storm that was brewing. But she also knew that if he could find the strength to do what was right, perhaps there was still hope. Just as the crowd began to grow restless, a distant sound of hoofs echoed through the night. Everyone turned their heads as Prince Adisa rode back toward the palace, his face pale and his eyes filled with uncertainty. But what would he say when he reached the gates? Would he be able to calm the storm he had created, or was it already too late? The crowd watched in silence as Prince Adisa approached the palace gates, his horse slowing to a stop. His heart raced as he saw the angry faces of the maidens he had wronged and the people who once adored him. Their whispers grew louder, and the air buzzed with tension. Obianuju stood at the top of the palace steps, her eyes locked on the prince. She knew this moment would come, but even she wasn't sure how Adisa would handle it. Would he speak the truth, or would his pride get the better of him? Adisa dismounted his horse, his legs shaking as he walked toward the crowd. The people parted slightly, giving him a path to the palace steps, but their eyes never left him. He could feel their anger and disappointment like a weight pressing down on him. As he climbed the steps, he turned to face them. For a moment, the entire kingdom seemed to hold its breath. Adisa opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Fear gripped him. He wasn't sure if he had the courage to admit the truth. What would they think of him? Could they ever forgive him? But then, he remembered the old woman's words in the forest, "The choice is yours. Will you continue to run, or will you return and make things right?" He took a deep breath and spoke, his voice trembling but clear. "I know that I have wronged many of you. I have acted out of selfishness and pride, and I have caused pain to those who trusted me." His words hung in the air, and the crowd listened in silence. "I do not ask for your forgiveness now, but I will work to make things right. I will take responsibility for the pain I have caused." The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, some sounding shocked, others still filled with anger. One of the maidens, a young woman named Nena, stepped forward, her eyes filled with tears. "You promised us love," she said, her voice shaking. "But all you did was take and leave us with nothing but shame." Her words pierced through Adisa like a blade. He felt the full weight of what he had done, and for the first time, he understood the depth of the hurt he had caused. "You are right," he said quietly. "I cannot undo the past, but I will do everything I can to make amends." As Adisa stood there, trying to hold himself together, the palace doors swung open, and the king emerged, his face grave. The crowd immediately fell silent, their eyes shifting from the prince to their ruler. The king's eyes met Adisa's, disappointment and concern etched into his features. "My son," he began, his voice firm but calm, "you have brought great shame to this kingdom and to our family. What you have done cannot be overlooked." Adisa bowed his head, unable to meet his father's gaze. "But," the king continued, "I believe in second chances. You will take responsibility for your actions, and I will give you one final opportunity to prove that you are worthy of leading this kingdom." The crowd murmured in surprise. Some were relieved, others still unsure if the prince deserved such mercy. "You will face the judgment of the people," the king declared. Whatever punishment they deem just, you will accept. Only then can you begin to rebuild their trust. Adisa's heart sank. He had known there would be consequences, but he hadn't expected this. He looked out at the crowd, unsure of what they would demand. Would they call for him to be stripped of his title? Exiled? Worse. Just as the crowd began to discuss what should be done, a voice rang out. I will stand for the prince. All eyes turned to Obianuju, who had stepped forward. Her face was calm, but her eyes were filled with determination. The crowd gasped in surprise. How could she, one of the maidens, defend the prince after all he had done? Obianuju looked at the crowd and then at Adisa. He has done wrong, yes. But I believe he can change. I have seen a side of him that is different from the man who made these mistakes. I ask you to give him a chance to make things right. Adisa stared at her in disbelief. Why would she stand up for him? After everything he had done, why would she still believe in him? The crowd was torn. Some agreed with Obianuju, while others still wanted justice. Nana, the young maiden who had spoken earlier, stepped forward again. How do we know he won't just betray us again? How can we trust him? Obianuju turned to face Nana. Because I will stand by him and hold him accountable. He won't be able to hide from the truth anymore. The tension in the air was palpable. Everyone waited to see what would happen next. Would the people accept Obianuju's offer, or would they demand harsh punishment for the prince? The king, seeing the uncertainty in the crowd, raised his hand to silence them. It is clear that my son has much to learn, but I agree with Obianuju. He deserves a chance to prove that he can change. However, this will not be an easy path. The king's gaze fell on Adisa. You will work to earn the trust of the people. You will make amends with those you have wronged, and you will marry only if you can show true love and devotion. Until then, your title as prince is suspended. You are no longer above the people, you will live among them and understand their struggles. Adisa's heart sank. He had never lived like an ordinary person before. How could he survive without the luxury and power he had always known? But he knew this was the only way forward. He had to prove he was worthy, not just to the kingdom, but to himself. Obianuju stepped closer to him, her eyes soft but serious. This is your chance, Adisa. Don't waste it. Adisa felt the ground shift beneath him as his father's words settled in. His title, his power, all gone in a moment. The weight of it crushed him, but he also knew there was no escape now. He had to face what he had caused and walk this new path. The king turned to the people, his voice steady. Let it be known that Prince Adisa will live among you until he has proven his worth. He will work to earn back your trust. If he fails, he will not return to the throne. The crowd murmured, some in agreement, others still unsure. The tension was thick, but Obianuju's unwavering gaze held a glimmer of hope. That night, Adisa was taken to the outskirts of the palace, where a small, simple house awaited him. It was nothing like the grand chambers he had grown up in. The bed was hard, the room cold, and the air heavy with silence. He had never lived this way, and the unfamiliarity made his chest tighten with dread. As the door closed behind him, Adisa sank to the floor, staring at the bare walls. His mind raced, filled with regret, fear, and confusion. How had he let things spiral so far out of control? How had he turned into someone so selfish? But even as these thoughts churned in his mind, he knew that he couldn't stay trapped in guilt. If he was going to win back the trust of the people, he had to start somewhere. He had to find a way to prove that he was more than his mistakes. The dawn came with a bitter chill. Adisa woke to the sound of birds chirping outside his window, their song contrasting sharply with the turmoil in his heart. He had no servants to bring him breakfast, no grand feast waiting on the table. Instead, he found a loaf of bread and a jug of water, left for him by the palace staff. As he ate, he thought about what his next steps should be. How could he begin to make amends with the maidens he had wronged? Where would he even start? Before he could think further, there was a soft knock at the door. Adisa opened it to find Obianuju standing outside, holding a small basket of food. "I thought you might need this," she said with a gentle smile. "It's not much, but it will help." Adisa stared at her, feeling a mix of gratitude and confusion. "Why are you helping me?" he asked quietly. Obianuju stepped inside and set the basket on the table. "Because I believe you can change, Adisa. But change doesn't come easily. You'll need guidance, and I'm willing to help you if you're willing to put in the effort." Adisa's throat tightened. He didn't deserve her kindness, but her words gave him a flicker of hope. I don't know how to make things right," he admitted, his voice low. Obianuju nodded, understanding his struggle. "The first step is to take responsibility. You've already admitted your mistakes, but now you need to act on that. The maidens you hurt are still suffering. You need to face them, speak to them, and listen to their pain." Adisa felt a lump form in his throat. The thought of facing Nana and the other maidens terrified him. They had every right to hate him. But he knew that Obianuju was right. If he didn't start there, he would never be able to move forward. Later that day, with Obianuju by his side, Adisa made his way to the market square. The people stared at him as he walked through the streets, some with curiosity, others with disdain. He could feel their eyes on him, their whispers chasing him like shadows. When he reached the square, he saw the maidens gathered in a small group, talking quietly among themselves. Nana was there, her arms folded across her chest, her expression cold and distant. Adisa took a deep breath and approached them. The maidens stopped talking, their eyes widening in surprise when they saw him. Nana's gaze hardened, and she stepped forward. "What do you want?" she asked sharply. "Haven't you done enough?" Adisa felt the sting of her words but kept his voice steady. "I've come to apologize. I know I've hurt you all, and I know I can never undo what I've done. But I want to take responsibility. I want to help you in any way I can." The maidens exchanged skeptical glances. Nana narrowed her eyes. "And how do you plan to do that? You can't erase the pain you've caused." Adisa's hands trembled, but he didn't look away. "I know. But I want to try. I will work for you, help you with whatever you need. I will take on your burdens, as you have carried mine." The maidens were silent for a moment, processing his words. Nana looked him up and down, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. "You'll work for us." "The prince, reduced to a servant?" Adisa nodded. "Yes. If that's what it takes, then I'll do it." Nana studied him for a long time, as if searching for any sign of deceit. "We'll see," she said at last. "You can start by helping at the farm tomorrow. We'll see if you're serious." As the sun set that evening, Adisa returned to his small house, exhausted but determined. The road ahead was long, and he knew it would not be easy. But for the first time in his life, he felt a sense of purpose, a desire to change, not just for the kingdom, but for himself. Obianuju visited him again that night, her eyes warm with encouragement. "You did well today," she said. "But this is only the beginning. The real challenge lies in proving that your change is genuine." Adisa nodded, grateful for her support. "I'll keep going," he promised. "I won't give up." And so, a new chapter in Adisa's life began, one of hard work, humility, and redemption. But the road was far from over, and the challenges ahead would test him in ways he had never imagined. The kingdom was still watching, and the people were still waiting for him to prove that he was worthy of their trust. The days turned into weeks, and Prince Adisa's life became a test of endurance. He worked alongside the maidens at the farm, plowing fields, carrying heavy baskets, and tending to animals. His once smooth hands became rough with blisters, and his royal clothes were traded for simple work garments. The people watched with cautious eyes, unsure whether this newfound humility was real or just another act. But Adisa never wavered. He rose early, worked tirelessly, and listened to the complaints and frustrations of the people he had once wronged. Nana and the other maidens made no effort to make things easy for him, but slowly, they began to see that he was serious about earning their trust. Months passed, and soon, the kingdom was preparing for the annual Festival of Forgiveness, a grand event where the people would celebrate the mending of broken relationships. The air was thick with excitement, but for Adisa, the festival was more than just a celebration, it was the final test. Would the people forgive him? Or would they reject him forever? The night of the festival arrived, and the kingdom's grand hall was filled with light and laughter. Musicians played lively tunes, and dancers twirled across the floor in vibrant colors. But there was a tension in the air, a silent question that hung over the crowd: what would happen to Prince Adisa? Adisa stood on the sidelines, his heart pounding in his chest. He had done everything he could to prove that he had changed, but he still wasn't sure if it was enough. Obianuju stood beside him, her presence calming his nerves. "You've done your part, Adisa," she whispered. "Now, it's up to them." The king stepped forward, raising his hand to call for silence. The music stopped, and all eyes turned toward him. "Tonight, we gather not just to celebrate," the king began, "but to reflect on the choices we make and the paths we walk. My son, Prince Adisa, has been on a journey of redemption. But the question remains, has he earned your forgiveness?" The crowd murmured, and the maidens who had worked alongside Adisa exchanged glances. Nana, as the most outspoken of the group, stepped forward, her face unreadable. She stood in front of Adisa, her eyes searching his face for a moment before she spoke. "You have wronged many, and the pain you caused cannot be erased," she said, her voice clear and strong. Adisa braced himself for her next words, unsure of what she would say. "But," Nana continued, "you have worked hard to make things right. You have stood by your word, and you have shown that you are willing to change. I cannot speak for everyone, but I believe that you deserve a second chance." A ripple of surprise ran through the crowd. The other maidens nodded in agreement, and slowly, one by one, people began to clap. The applause grew louder, until the entire hall was filled with the sound of acceptance. Adisa's heart swelled with relief and gratitude. He had done it. He had earned their trust, not through words, but through actions. The king smiled, pride shining in his eyes. "Let it be known," he declared, "that Prince Adisa has proven himself worthy. His title is restored, and he shall one day take his place as the rightful ruler of this kingdom." After the festival, Adisa and Obianuju walked together through the quiet streets of the kingdom. The stars above shone brightly, as if blessing the new chapter in his life. "I couldn't have done this without you," Adisa said, his voice soft. "You believed in me when no one else did." Obianuju smiled, her eyes sparkling in the moonlight. "You did the hard work, Adisa. I just gave you a little push." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Obianuju, I've realized something. All this time, I was searching for love, trying to fill the emptiness inside me with things that didn't matter. But now I see that true love isn't about taking, it's about giving. And I want to give that to you, if you'll have me." Obianuju's breath caught in her throat, her heart racing. "Are you sure, Adisa?" This isn't just another promise, is it? Adisa shook his head. I've learned from my mistakes. This time, I'm certain. I love you, Obianuju. Tears filled Obianuju's eyes, but they were tears of joy. I love you too, Adisa. They stood there for a moment, wrapped in the warmth of their newfound love. The journey had been long, and the road had been filled with challenges, but they had made it through. Together, they would build a future that was filled not with selfishness, but with kindness, respect, and true love. Prince Adisa and Obianuju were married in a grand ceremony, attended by people from all corners of the kingdom. Their love became a symbol of redemption and hope, showing that even those who make mistakes can find a way to change. Under Adisa's rule, the kingdom flourished. He ruled with fairness and humility, always remembering the lessons he had learned during his time living among the people. Obianuju, now queen, was beloved by all for her wisdom and compassion. And as the years passed, their story was told to children and grandchildren, a tale of forgiveness, redemption, and the power of true love. The end. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more thrilling tales like this, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Your support helps me continue sharing exciting and interesting stories. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Creating a powerful and uplifting sound. The call for redemption and the prince's desire to change.